Hi everyone, I'm Shiva Manjunath, and in this walkthrough video, I'll help you create and launch your very first free and blazing fast static website or blog using Hugo, Github, and Netlify. I'll walk you through the entire process step by step. So let's get started. Now let's look at some of the prerequisites that you'll need to have in place. First, you'll need an Apple Mac or a Microsoft Windows PC. I'm on a laptop running Windows 8. Next, you should have a basic understanding of Git, the free and open source distributed version control software. Third, you should already have the Git client installed on your Mac or PC and have it configured to check in and check out files in code repositories. Finally, you'll need a website domain name registered with the domain registrar. Now, you should already have registered the domain name of the website that you want to build and launch with Netlify. For the purpose of this walkthrough, I will be using a domain that I already registered a while back called meowfrancisco.com. So wherever you see meowfrancisco or meowfrancisco.com in this walkthrough, you will need to substitute that with the actual domain name of your website. So if you haven't already done any of these prerequisites, now is the time to go and complete them and then come back. So here's an overview of the steps we will be taking to complete building and launching your free and fast website with Netlify. First, we'll create the local folder structure that is needed for all your website files as well as for Hugo. Then we'll download and install Hugo, the static website generator. After that, we will configure Hugo, which is very simple, and then we'll verify that Hugo is up and running on your PC or Mac. After that, we will create your website on Localhost, which is it'll be running locally on your Mac or PC. Then we'll build the empty website and verify that it's displayed and working. After that, we'll create some content and jazz it up. And then once we are done with the content, we will install a website theme or skin as it's sometimes known, and then check that out too. Then we'll build your website on the local host using Hugo, and after that we'll build and test your website also on your local host. Once we are done with that, we will prepare the website for deployment to GitHub and then from there to Netlify. After that, we'll initialize your local Git repository to maintain your source code. Then we'll push your website files to GitHub. And once we are done with that, we will create and connect your website onto Netlify, and where we'll create a new site. And then once we are done with that, we'll make sure that everything is working nicely and automatically. And after that, we will configure the custom domain and point the domain name for the website that you registered or already have to the Netlify site. And finally, we'll verify that the custom domain is working using Netlify. In this step, we will create the local folder structure needed for both Hugo as well as the website. Open a File Explorer window and create a folder called Hugo under your C drive. I've already created it here. Now go into this Hugo folder on your C drive and then create a new folder called bin. Now this bin folder is where Hugo's binary will reside, and Hugo ships as just a single binary called hugo.exe. Now go up one level back to the Hugo folder and create another folder called sites. So this sites folder will contain all the websites that you create using Hugo, and they'll all reside under this folder. You can also have this Hugo folder and the subfolders anywhere else. Just make sure that when we configure it in the next step, you select the appropriate path to the exe. In this step, we'll download and install Hugo, the static website engine/generator. If you are on a Mac, then visit the Installing Hugo page at this URL, gohugo.io/overview/installing, and then click the link to installation on OS X. This will take you to a page where you have step-by-step instructions on installing Hugo on Mac. And I think it's pretty straightforward, but you'll know yourself when you attempt the installation. Once you are done installing and configuring Hugo on Mac, the rest of this video is more or less the same, whether you are on a Mac or PC, since everything is done via the command line or git bash command prompt or using files and folders on the file system. For installing Hugo on Windows, head over to gohugo.io and then click the install button. This will take you to the Getting Started section, so click the Download button. You will now be taken to the Hugo Releases page, and the latest release will be labeled green and it will be called titled latest release. So currently it's version 0.16. Scroll down on this page until you see the download section with the list of the latest releases. Download either the 32-bit or 64-bit version, depending on whether or not you have a 32 or 64-bit Windows operating system on your machine. Now, if you don't know whether you have a 32-bit or 64-bit Windows OS, here's how you find out. Open your control panel. Now click System and Security, and then click System. So here in the system type, it'll show you whether it's 64-bit or 32-bit. So now you can see here, like my version is the 64-bit Windows operating system. So I'm going to click this one and it'll ask me to save it. So I'll save it in my Hugo folder. I'm going to then move it into the bin folder and then extract it here. So make sure that when you extract it, it extracts into the bin folder. So delete that. So you should now see three files, the hugo.exe, which is the single executable binary that you'll use to run Hugo and generate your static websites. And then you should also see the license.md markdown file containing the license and the readme.md file. So you can delete the zip file if you want, but I usually like to leave it in there just in case I need to go back to this specific version quickly. Our next step is to configure Hugo. There is only one configuration, and that is to add the path to the Hugo executable in your Windows path environment variable so that you're able to run Hugo from any folder in the command line window or in PowerShell or in Git Bash command window. There are two ways to do this, and we will take the scenic route as that is safer in my opinion. In a File Explorer window, right-click Computer and then click Properties. Then click the Advanced System Settings and then click Environment Variables. In the System Variables pane, scroll down until you see the path variable. Select the path variable and then click Edit. So the value of the variable will be pre-selected. So don't do anything except right click there and click copy to copy the value. Open Notepad or your favorite text editor and then paste in the value and make sure like word wrap is selected so you don't miss anything. So this will be the backup copy of the path system variable. Click File, Save As, and then save off this value before the change as something like path underscore before config change in the Hugo directory so that we have a backup. Next, create a new file and copy and paste this value again. So this is the one we are going to be changing to include Hugo's path. Open a run window and then make sure it's empty, and then go back to the bin window and then drag the Hugo exe so that it copies the whole path to it. I like to do it this way so that I don't have any typos. You could also copy the path from here and then, type in this, whatever you like, but this is safer. So copy this, then come back to the copy of the path that you pasted in a new window, type a semicolon, and then paste the new path to the Hugo exe that you just copied over. And then finally do edit select all, and then do remove the word wrap and then copy it. So this is the value for your new path. Now come back to the environment variable again by going to advanced system settings in my computer, and then environment variable, scroll down to the path, click edit, and then it'll be pre-selected, so delete it and then paste in the new value. So this is the new path, and then click OK, and then OK again, and then OK. So that completes configuring Hugo, which is essentially just setting up the path in the environment variable to the exe. Now we'll verify our Hugo setup. Open a command prompt window and make sure you are running it as administrator, and then type Hugo space version, and if everything is configured correctly like we did, it should show you the version of Hugo that you're running, which is 0.16, the same one that we downloaded. You can also type Hugo space help, and then it will show you all the commands that you can run with Hugo. So this completes a verification that Hugo is set up correctly and working on our machine. If for some reason you get Hugo is not recognized as an internal or external command or something like that, then please double check the path that you have created updated in the environment variable. Make sure it's going to the right place where the exe is. And if you're still having trouble, then head over to discuss.gohugo.io, and then in the categories, select support, and then post a message here and somebody will help you out quite quickly. We will now create your website on localhost, which is on your local machine. Back in the command window, change directories to the Hugo Sites folder. So I have a folder window also open so that you can also see everything happening simultaneously. So I'm going to say cd and to the sites directory. So now we are in the Hugo Sites directory. And in Hugo, you create a new site with the command Hugo new site and then the name of the site. So as you can see, as soon as I did that, it created the website folder under the sites folder, and then if you go into it, this is pretty much the layout or setup of a Hugo site. So there's a config.toml configuration file in the folder, and then there is also the content folder, which is where all your website content will go. And then you have a themes folder which will contain your theme, and right now we don't have any. And then the static folder is where you'll have your images, JavaScript, and other static files. Now let's build the empty website and verify that it's working. Back in our command window, change directories to the website folder, and then type Hugo space server and press enter. So Hugo has a built-in HTTP server, and you should see something like this where Hugo builds and hosts the website locally on your local host. The port number that's shown here after the colon is dynamic, and your port number may be different from what's being shown in this demo. So copy this URL or type it in, but I'll copy it. Enter. And then open a new browser window and then paste it. And you should see a blank page if the build of the empty site was successful. And if you right click and do view source, also you should see nothing. This doesn't mean that there is an error. This means that the build was working with the empty site with no content and no template. Let's go ahead and create some content now. Since our website is empty, let's go ahead and create some content. I've left the command window that was running the Hugo server, our localhost website, as it is, so that it will continue to be running and be updated with the changes as we work on it. So open another command window as administrator, and then change directory to the folder that has the website, and then type Hugo new and about.md. So this will create the about page. And as you saw, as soon as any new content or any file arrives, the HTTP server picks it up, and see how it says 0 of 2 drafts rendered. And then here's the about page. So if I open it in Notepad, I can see that Hugo has stubbed it out with the some of the basic required fields. So I've entered some content now. This top part between the 3 plus signs is called front matter, and this is like metadata about the post. So I've given it a slug, a post slug or URL slug. And then what's below the front matter is the actual content in markdown format. Next, we'll create our first website post or blog post. So type Hugo new post /first.md. So this will create a post. So it'll create a folder for that section, which is the post section, and then the file is here. So I'm going to open that in Notepad, and as you can see, it's stubbed out the front matter like we saw before. I've updated the content for the first post with some markdown, and then this here is a shortcode in Hugo to embed YouTube videos. You just give the video ID and use the syntax, and it will automatically embed it. Save it. Now that we have created some content, it's time to display it using a website theme. Hugo comes with plenty of free and beautiful website themes. You can see these themes in action at themes.gohugo.io. And if you like a particular theme, you can click on it and go to the demo page. And then if you click demo, you can see it using some sample content, and then you can figure out if you like it and then download it. The themes can also be downloaded from GitHub under this URL, this repository called Hugo theme. For the purpose of this video and step-by-step guide, let's use a theme called hide. So on the themes repository page, search for hide, and there's 3 of them. Click the one that doesn't have a suffix. And then once you're in the theme page, click this link to clone or download. And we'll keep things simple, so we'll just download the zip file of the theme and save it under the themes folder. Once it's saved, open it and right click it to extract all, and extract it under the themes folder of the website. So remove the extra stuff. And then once that is done, delete the zip file and make sure that you rename it to just have hide and not the rest of the hash. So it should look like this. We have the content and we have a theme now, so it's time to build and test your website locally. Back in the command windows, if you still have the Hugo server running, press Ctrl C on the window to stop it, and then type Hugo space server and then dash dash theme equal to hide and then dash dash build drafts and press enter. So what we just did was we are telling Hugo, the static site generator engine, to use hide as the theme, the one that we just downloaded. And we are also telling it to generate and display all the content, even if it is in draft status, that is, it's not in the published status yet. So this switch allows us to test our content without publishing it to the live site. So as you can see here, it says 2 of 2 drafts rendered. And so this command has built the website and rendered the pages on the local HTTP served website. So you should now be able to see this website on the localhost, and we can see our about page and also the first post, which has the video embed that we previously created in the content. So this means that our website is up and running and nicely with the theme that we selected, and it's running on the local host. Next, we'll prepare the website for deployment. Before we get started preparing the website for deployment, I wanted to show you a couple of really cool things that I like about Hugo. So the site title says My New Hugo Site, right? And that's not very creative and reflective of the site name. So I'm going to edit the config.toml, which contains the site name, and the website is running under the local web server here, right, as you can see. So I'm going to change it to what it actually is, and then watch what happens when I save it. It immediately gets reflected here because the site server detects these changes under the website folder and quickly rebuilds the site. So the same thing will happen if I update the post also. This title is not very descriptive, right? So I'll change it to something very descriptive and save it. And as you can see, the title also immediately changed. We'll start by adding the website artifacts to Git. So open a Git bash window and run it as an administrator. And then change directory to our websites folder. And if you type it in single quotes, then you can use the Windows format like that. So now we are in our website folder. If I stop the server and then if I run Hugo without the server switch like that, what Hugo will do it'll generate the static version of your website with all the HTML pages and include the files in a directory or folder called public. So watch what happens here now. So see how because we haven't undrafted them, it created no post, but see how it created the public folder here. And then this will contain all your static websites files. So we want to make sure that this public folder is not source controlled by Git. So we will create a .gitignore file in this root directory for the website and add public to it, so Git will ignore it and not track it in its source control, since that folder is dynamic and it will be generated every time. So type this command echo inside quotes /public, close the quotes, and then double greater than dot git ignore. So that will create the git ignore file and then put the public folder inside it. This static folder in Hugo contains all the static files like JavaScript files, CSS files, and image files and other media files that you would use in your website. We do want to retain this folder, but since it's currently empty, we don't have anything, and GitHub doesn't like empty folders or directories, and it will delete them. So we will add something to the static directory or folder to make sure that Git tracks this folder and doesn't delete. So type touch static slash dot git ignore, and what that will do is create an empty dot git ignore file with nothing in it, so nothing will be ignored. But since there is a file, Git will make sure not to delete it. The next thing you'll want to do is make sure that all the links within your site are relative links to the root path. So open the config.toml file and remove this whole thing for the base URL and just replace it with a / like this and save. The last thing we want to do is make sure that all the posts are in published format instead of the draft. So you can do that by changing this front matter parameter from a draft from true to false. So I'm going to set that to false and save it. And then I'm going to do the same thing for this guy. And you can also do this on the command line by executing a statement like this, Hugo space undraft, and then the relative path to the file. So if I come back here, see how it was, I had set it to true, and then it's false now. We can now initialize your local Git repository. So I've terminated the Hugo server execution, the web server. Go back to your git bash command window and then make sure that you're in the website folder inside the git bash window. And now type git space init and press enter. So this will initialize an empty Git repository, and you can see the Git folder that's created here under the root. Next, type git add and then a period and press enter. And what this will do is it'll mark all the files that we have to be staged, to be committed into the repository. And since we had told it to ignore the public folder, it wouldn't have added any of this even if it had any files in it. So now we can look at the status of what's being staged to commit by typing git status, and you can see these are all the files it's going to add into the repository. So you have the git ignore, then the config, and then the content, and then also the static folder since we had a file in it, and then the rest are all the theme files, and it has ignored the public folder. So this is what we want. So I'm going to commit all these to the repository. Type git commit and then give it a commit message and press enter. So now if I look at the log, it will show that I've committed the files to the repository. We can now push your website files to GitHub after we create a remote repository on GitHub. First, let's create our remote repository on github.com. Log on to github.com, and if you want to keep your website source code private, which is what I think most people would prefer, then make sure that your current GitHub account plan allows you to create a private repository. Otherwise, you'll just have to make do with a public repository for now in order to complete this step-by-step guide. Create a new repository on your GitHub, and then give it the name. So I'm going to call it the domain name, and I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to make it private. And then do not include any README or license or git ignore files for now. You can add them later once you have pushed your local repository to GitHub from your local PC. So click create repository, and then it would have created the repository and it will show it to you here. And before you leave this page, click the repository page, and then click this copy to clipboard against this icon to get the path to the remote repository. Now come back to the Git Bash window. Make sure that you are in the website's repository and the branch is showing as master, which is the current branch. And then type git space remote space add space origin, and then paste the URL to the remote repository and press enter. So this command connects your local repository in Git to the remote github.com repository for your website so that you can pull and push, which are two commands used to exchange files between the local and remote repositories. So you can type git space remote -v and press enter, and that'll show you what you have just set up, and we can verify it, like the origin for fetch and for push is that URL on github.com. So now let's execute a push command to publish all our changes in our local Git repository to github.com. So type git space push origin and then the master branch and press enter. You will now be prompted to enter the username and password for your github.com account. So I've entered the username and then the password, and then if it's all right, it'll show you how it's published or pushed the files to the remote branch on github.com, like master to master. And then you can come back to github.com, and if you refresh the page, you will see all the things that you pushed from your local machine, and you can see the commit history also. So the first commit, which was a few minutes ago. And we are finally ready to create and connect your website on Netlify. This is where all the fun starts. If you haven't already created an account at Netlify, you can do that right now. Go to netlify.com and then click the login link, and this will take you to the login/sign up page, and they allow you to log in with different providers like Git providers. But for the purpose of this, you can either create your account with your email or do what I did, which is I use my GitHub logins. So once you're logged in to your Netlify account, you'll be taken to your sites, app.netlify.com, which will have a list of all the sites that you have created. Click the new site button, and then this will bring you to the screen where you can connect your site's asset hosted on any of these various platforms. Since your site assets are hosted on github.com, we'll need to link Netlify to GitHub. Click this link, and this will show you all the repositories that you have on github.com. It's time to allow Netlify and GitHub to communicate with each other. So select the website repository, and if you haven't already authorized Netlify to connect to your GitHub repository, then you'll be presented with an authorization screen. But since I've already done that with my repositories, it's directly taking me to the configuration screen. In the config setting for the build, make sure that you're in the right branch. This is the same branch that you had on github.com for your website. And then the directory to deploy after building, you should enter public because the public folder is where we set up Hugo also to generate the website files and publish to them. And then in the build command, enter Hugo space dash dash theme equal to hide. So this tells Hugo to build the site and publish it to the public folder using the hide theme. This theme can also be set in the config level, but we won't look at that right now. So once you've set all this up, click build your site, and now it's time to sit back and watch Netlify work its magic. So what Netlify will do is it'll download your latest site assets from github.com and then perform the Hugo build. And then it'll also optimize the included files for performance and publish your site over a distributed CDN for maximum speed and performance. So you can watch the build progress in this window, build log window, and once it's successfully completed, Netlify will deploy your website to a temporary URL. So if you click the back button, it'll take you to the deploy history. And here you can see the temporary URL where Netlify has deployed your site. So if you click that, you can see that our website has been deployed to sort of like a subdomain URL on Netlify. And if I click the post page, you can see the first video. And then I can also go back to the root, and so everything looks like it's working. So now all we have to do is the final step, which is to configure the custom domain. We will now configure the custom domain on Netlify and the domain register. Log on to your Netlify account if you haven't already done so. And then you can see here that it has assigned a default system generated name to our website, which is not cool. So click that, and in the name, click edit, and then just put in the website name without the .com or the .net or whatever extension you have, and click save. So now the site will be available at the name we gave .netlify.com. So this is good. So this is the first step. Now go back to the site settings page again, and then see how it says domain and no custom domain. So click the edit box and then enter the domain name, the full domain name. So it's miafrancisco.com. And also Netlify recommends that you use www domain instead of the apex domain, because they say that if you don't use www, you won't be able to take full advantage of their CDN unless you use the www prefix or a similar subdomain. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to enter the domain name as www.miafrancisco.com and then click save. Next, we'll head over to our domain registrar and update the DNS records for the domain to point to the Netlify servers. Since my example domain miafrancisco.com is with GoDaddy, I will walk you through the process at GoDaddy. Now, it'll be similar at other domain registrars, and you should be able to follow along if you have your domain at some other registrar. And also, this link on the Netlify documentation site has domains provider specific walkthroughs for all these different registrars, and they have screenshots and accompanying text, so it should be fairly easy for you if you have your domain with some of these other registrars. I'm logged into GoDaddy and I'm going to click the domain name, and once you're there, click the DNS zone file tab and this will show you all the DNS records that are set up. Click Add Record, and then select CNAME alias. In the host, type www, and then points to should be this domain on netlify.com, which is where the site is running. So I'm going to paste that in, and then let this be at default, and then click add another. Now in the other record, select A for A record, and then in the host, type the @ symbol. And then points to should be this IP address that Netlify has provided. So this one normally change, but to double confirm it, always go to Netlify's documentation on the custom domains, and on that page they would have the latest configurations for the A record. So that's where I copied the IP address from. So come back here and leave that at default and click finish. And then unless you click the Save Changes button on GoDaddy, nothing will be saved. So click that. And they say that it could take up to 48 hours to take effect, but usually it's much sooner. Also, I'm seeing here that there's another A record for the ad, which is a route to pointing to some GoDaddy address. So I'm going to select that and delete it and save it so that I only have the Netlify's IP address in for the A record. Our final step is to verify that the custom domain is working. The DNS changes usually take just a few minutes to propagate, even though they say 48 hours. So open a new browser window and then enter the URL, and there you go. So it seems to be working now. I can go into the post page, and if I do view source, you can see all the links and everything is good to go. And I can also go back, click here and go back to the root, and then go to the about page, and I can see that too. If for some reason you don't see the custom domain, you can wait for a few minutes, or you can also try things like flushing the DNS cache on your Windows machine like this by typing ipconfig/flush DNS, and that will flush the local DNS cache in case the domain name is cached on your machine. So this completes our setup of a free and fast static website using Hugo and GitHub on Netlify. I hope this was useful to you. If you run into any issues, feel free to leave them in the comment below this video, and I'll try to respond to you as quickly as I can. Goodbye.